My name is Alara. The memory of the river is not a memory. It is a ghost that lives in the marrow of my bones. That summer, the sun was a merciless coin in a bleached sky, and the water called to us with a false promise of coolness. My sister Iris and I, twins in form but never in spirit, waded in, our laughter as light as the dappled light on the surface. Then the current, sly and strong, snatched our ankles. I remember the shock of the cold, the terrifying silence beneath the roar of water in my ears, the panic as my limbs thrashed against the indifferent pull. And I remember him, Leo, his face a mask of agonized decision as he fought the current. His hand closed around my wrist, a bruising anchor, and he dragged me, coughing and retching, onto the muddy bank. It was only when my vision cleared, water streaming from my hair like tears, that I understood the cost. The river flowed on, serene and swallowing. Iris was gone. The years that followed were a silent funeral for two families. Grief was the air we breathed, guilt the food we ate. My parents looked at me, their living daughter, with a love so tangled in loss it sometimes resembled pain. Out of a crushing, desperate gratitude we took Leo, Indiana. His own family was shattered. We became each other's penance. And later, as things that are broken sometimes do, we fused together. We married. It was not a celebration. It was a quiet, solemn sealing of a tomb we all lived inside. For 45 years I was his wife. I kept his house, I shared his meals, I lay beside him in a bed wide with the absence of the woman who should have been there. The ghost of Iris was our silent third, her memory the only thing he truly cherished. I saw it in the faraway look in his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking, in the way he never spoke her name but carried it in the slump of his shoulders. When I was 58 we returned to our hometown, a pilgrimage to the graves we tended. The past was a heavy coat we never took off. As we walked across the old stone bridge, the river flowing beneath it with the same whispering voice, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the breeze. Leo stopped. He didn't look at me. His gaze was fixed on the water, on a point in time 45 years gone. "Alara," he said, and his voice was so quiet, so final. Then his hands were on me. Not the indifferent touch of our married years, but a shove filled with a lifetime of repressed fury. I stumbled, the world tilting, and the back of my head met the unforgiving stone of the bridge pillar with a crack that echoed in the very center of my being. Pain, white and dazzling, exploded. As I crumpled, my vision blurring, I saw him, a silhouette against the sky, throw himself over the railing and into the water. The cold of the stone seeped into me. I was dying. I knew it. And his last words, flung at the river, at me, at fate, reached my fading hearing. "Alara, if there's a next life, I swear I'll never save you again." The truth, cruel and absolute, settled upon me with the weight of the stone. All those years. All that silent, shared suffering. He had never let go. He had only accumulated regret, and it had curdled into this. A desire to erase his choice and by extension me. Darkness crept in from the edges. But my final thought was not of him nor of the pain. It was a fierce, defiant spark. If there really were a next life, how wonderful that would be. The sensation of dying did not fade into nothingness. It transformed. The cold of the stone became a different, all-encompassing cold, the crushing, breath-stealing cold of water. My body screamed, not with impact but with the desperate, instinctual need for air. I was underwater. My eyes flew open. Murky green light, the churn of silt, the frantic bubbles of my own breath escaping. Instinct older than thought took over. I kicked, I clawed upwards towards the shivering, sun-dappled surface. My head broke through and I dragged in a ragged, glorious gasp. The world was screaming. Not just me, the splashing, the panic. I blinked, water from my eyes. I was in the river. The same river. And there, just ahead, fighting the current with the powerful strokes of an 18-year-old, was Leo. But his face was not twisted with the hatred of an old man. It was taut with the wild, desperate fear of a boy. And he was swimming with every ounce of his strength, not towards me but past me. His eyes were locked on another figure, flailing downstream. Iris. Time didn't slow. It snapped into a crystalline, horrifying clarity. This was that day. The day it all began. The day it all ended. A hysterical sob caught in my throat, half terror, half a wild, impossible hope. He was going to save her. He was going to make the choice he had always wished he'd made. But I was not the helpless girl from that memory anymore. In the decades of my haunted marriage, I had done one thing for myself, one secret painful thing. I had learned to swim. Night after night in the public pool, I would move through the water until my muscles burned, the chlorine sting on my skin a welcome distraction from the salt of old tears. I had been preparing for a moment I never thought would come. I wanted to save my sister more than anyone. No. The word was a guttural cry ripped from me, lost in the splash. I didn't need to stop him. I needed to beat him. I turned and plunged after him, my strokes inelegant but powerful, fueled by a 45-year debt of grief. The current fought me, but I fought harder. I reached them as Leo grabbed Iris's arm. Our eyes met over her struggling form, his wide with shock and confusion. In that fractured second I saw a flicker, a seismic shift in his gaze. It wasn't just recognition of me, it was a recognition of himself. The knowledge crashed into him as it had into me. He'd come back to. Without a word we fell into a grim synchronized rescue. Together we hauled Iris's limp body onto the shore. We collapsed on the bank, gasping, water pouring from our clothes. The summer sun beat down, absurdly cheerful. Leo lifted his head, his chest heaving. His eyes found mine again, and the understanding was complete, a silent, awful communion. His lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came out. Instead he moved on instinct, shifting to kneel over Iris, his hands going to her shoulders, his head tilting. He was going to breathe for her. A memory sharp as a blade cut through me. In my first life the rumors had started because of this. A boy's mouth on a girl's, seen by someone on the bridge. In our small choke town in the 1990s that was a brand. It had led to whispers, to pressure, to a rushed marriage that buried 3 lives. Don't touch her. My voice was weak from the river, but it was iron. I shoved him aside, the motion startling in its ferocity. He fell back stunned. Alara, she's not breathing. I know, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I would not let her life be dictated by the touch of a boy she didn't even like. I knelt, placed my palms on her sternum, and began the compressions I'd learned from a Red Cross manual in another lifetime. Wake up, Iris. Please wake up. My tears fell warm on her cold, pale skin. They mixed with the river water. I pleaded, I pressed, my whole world narrowed to the space between my hands and her still heart. And then, a miracle. A cough. A shudder. Water spilled from her lips, and her eyes, the same shade as mine but always clearer, fluttered open. A sound escaped me, a raw, wounded thing that was pure joy. I gathered her into my arms, holding her so tightly I feared I might break her. I wept into her wet hair, my whole body shaking with the force of it. Her arms, slowly gaining strength, came up and held me just as tightly. It wasn't a dream. The nightmare that had haunted me for 45 years ended on that sun-drenched riverbank, with the sound of my sister coughing, living, breathing. We sat under the sun waiting for our clothes to dry, a silence thick and strange between us. Iris, wrapped in my arms, shivered with delayed shock. Leo sat a few feet away, his gaze fixed not on me but on Iris. A look of such profound, aching relief that it was a physical presence in the air. It was the look he had never in all our years given me. The understanding was a live wire connecting him and me. We had both returned. We both carried the weight of the ruined life we'd left behind. But the object of his devotion, the source of my guilt, was now alive and breathing between us. He didn't speak to me. When the shadows began to lengthen, he walked us to our doorstep, his movements stiff. In the fading dusk he finally spoke, his voice soft, directed at Iris. Go change. Don't catch a cold. Then he turned and left, his shoulders hunched, without a single glance in my direction. The dismissal was cleaner, crueler than any word. Inside, our parents fussed over Iris's pallor. What happened, sweetheart? You look like you've seen a ghost. It was nothing, I answered smoothly before Iris could speak. My voice was calm, a practiced serenity from a lifetime of masking turmoil. Mr. Donovan's dog got loose and charged us down by the river. It scared her, but I chased it off. No harm done. The lie settled easily. My parents, weary from long work shifts, sighed and shook their heads. Always getting into scrapes, Alara. Look after your sister. With that, they retreated, the crisis averted. Later, after the house had settled into the deep quiet of sleep, a soft knock echoed at my door. I opened it to find Leo on the threshold, holding a small ceramic pot that steamed gently into the night air. Seeing me, he looked momentarily off balance. "The ginger tea," he said, his voice hesitant. "It's for Iris." To ward off a chill. A pause heavy with reluctance. "You should have some too." I took the warm pot from him. "Thank you." I moved to close the door, a clear end to the exchange. His hand shot out, stopping the door. "Ilara." His voice was tight, his Adam's apple bobbing. The night seemed to hold its breath. "You came back too, didn't you?" He didn't wait for confirmation. The words, clearly rehearsed, tumbled out as if he feared he'd lose his nerve. "You already know. The one I've always loved is Iris. The past life, it was a mistake. I only saved you because you were closer. Forget it. And please," he added, the plea sharp, "don't bother me anymore." He delivered it all in one breath, a preemptive strike against any emotion, any claim I might have. These were the words he had buried for decades, the truth that had festered and finally killed us both. He looked at me, expecting tears perhaps, or pleading. I looked back, my soul feeling strangely still, a lake after a storm has passed. "Leo," I said, my voice steady, almost serene. "You know I never liked your type to begin with." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, followed by something that might have been offense, then a faint, stiff nod. "Good. That's good." He turned and vanished into the dark. I carried the pot to my room. Iris was there, already changed into soft cotton pajamas, rubbing her hair with a towel. She looked up, her eyes curious. "Who was that?" "Leo," I said, setting the pot down. "He brought ginger tea for you. For the cold." A small, unconscious smile touched the corners of her lips. She looked visibly pleased as she poured a cup, the steam rising to brush her cheeks, flushed from the towel's friction. She took a small, careful sip. I watched her, a knot of old and new emotions twisting inside me. After a long moment, I ventured, my voice quiet. "Iris, are you still planning to turn him down?" We had gone to the river that day because Leo had asked to meet her. He was going to confess his feelings. She, knowing she didn't return them and wanting a buffer, had dragged me along. She had always been perceptive. She'd noticed his attention. What no one knew, what I had buried so deep I almost forgot it myself, was that I had liked Leo too. He was handsome, sharp, and carried a gentle patience that felt like a sanctuary. Because he loved my sister, he treated me with a kind, brotherly care, helping with homework, including me. To my young, yearning heart, that attention was a sun-eyed orbited. "Actually," Iris said suddenly, setting the cup down. Her voice held a new, awkward note. "I think Leo's a pretty decent guy." She turned to me, her gaze gentle but painfully cautious. "Maybe I should give him a chance. What do you think?" She hesitated, her eyes searching my face. "Ilara, you wouldn't be upset, would you?" I felt as if the floor had vanished. I stared into her careful, worried eyes, and the final piece of the past slid into place with devastating clarity. She had known. All along she had known about my childish crush. In our first life she had insisted on taking me to the river that day, not out of fear of being alone with him, but to give me a chance. She had gone there for me. And she had died for me. The guilt of 2 lifetimes crashed over me, a wave so immense it stole my breath. My nose stung, my eyes burned. I fought it down, forced my voice into a lightness I didn't feel. "Iris, what are you talking about? Don't be silly. How could I possibly be mad?" I managed a smile, aiming for casual dismissal. "You know me. I don't like guys like Leo anymore. All his gentleness, it's always been for you. Those silly kid feelings are long gone." Now everything was returning to its rightful orbit. "Iris, you should try. I mean it. I really do wish you both happiness." For the first time I could see a path that was truly mine. Not sitting alone in a quiet house, waiting for a man who loved a ghost. The next day Iris and Leo officially became a couple. I climbed the big sycamore tree at the edge of town, seeking the solace of height and leaves. Below, in the dappled shade, their laughter mixed with the electric hum of cicadas, a sound that vibrated in my teeth. It was the soundtrack of the summer I remembered, but now I was outside of it, an observer. I watched them, and a strange peace settled over me, laced with a new, sharp purpose. That afternoon I dug out my old high school textbooks from the back of my closet, the pages smelling of dust and forgotten ambition. This time I would not drop out. This time I would take the college entrance exams. My grades had been middling, but I had something no other teenager did. The relentless focus of a woman who had already wasted one life. By September our senior year began. Iris and Leo chose the science track. I, remembering a latent skill with words, chose humanities. We were in different wings of the school. After the final bell, they appeared at my classroom door like clockwork, a matched set. "Elara, let's go home," Iris called, smiling as Leo shouldered her bag. I didn't look up from my notebook. "You two go ahead. I signed up for evening tutorials." She froze. "Tutorials? Since when? Why didn't you tell me?" "My grades aren't great," I said, finally meeting her gaze. "If I want to get into college, I need to work. I already told Mom and Dad." My brow was furrowed not in performance, but in genuine concentration over a stubborn algebra problem. Iris looked like she wanted to argue, but Leo's face darkened. He took her hand, his grip possessive. "Don't bother with her," he said, his voice cool. "Let her do what she wants. Let's go." They disappeared down the hallway, his arm around her shoulders. I lowered my head back to my work, the silence after their departure feeling not like loneliness, but like space to breathe. A low, amused chuckle sounded behind me. "Interesting." I turned slightly. It was Callum Reed, the city transfer student who had arrived last spring. He was a figure of aloof mystery, either asleep in class or reading contraband novels, treating the world with a lazy, cynical disdain. We'd never spoken. I ignored him, my time feeling too precious, too finite to waste on a bored rich kid playing at being disaffected. The old ceiling fan above me creaked a rhythmic complaint as I bent back over my textbook. The numbers swimming into focus, my future waiting in the spaces between them. The walk home from evening tutorials was a long uphill trudge under a blanket of stars. The summer night air was thick and sweet, but my steps felt light, purposeful. I recited historical dates under my breath, the beam of my small flashlight cutting a wavering path ahead. Near the turn to my street, a figure detached itself from the shadows. "Leo." "Elara." He stepped into the light, frowning. "You don't have to go to these lengths to avoid me. It's not safe for a girl to walk home alone. Stop being stubborn. Starting tomorrow, you come home with us." I stopped, the quiet of the night amplifying the thud of my heart. I looked at his face, so sure of his own narrative. A dry, humorless laugh escaped me. "You think I'm avoiding you? Isn't that obvious?" He shot back, his voice edged. "Ever since Iris and I got together, you've been pulling away. You don't have to prove anything. If you want to study, we can help you. There's no need for this performance." Iris worries. Performance. The word hung in the humid air. I took a step closer, my voice low and clear. "You think me staying late, me studying, is a performance for your attention, Leo?" He opened his mouth, but no retort came. "I don't like you anymore," I said, each word a deliberate stone placed between us. "Not like that. Studying isn't about you. It's about me. I want to go to college for myself. Stop flattering yourself." His expression tightened, his earlier concern hardening into something colder. "Elara, do you have to be so harsh?" "You're the one who stopped me," I replied, holding his gaze. "You're the one talking like you have me all figured out. You don't." We stood facing each other, two veterans of a long, miserable war, trapped in young bodies on a quiet street. The air crackled with the unsaid history of a shared, terrible lifetime. After a taut silence, Leo let out a short, derisive laugh. "College? I'll believe it when I see it. Just don't come begging me for help later." He turned on his heel and walked away, his silhouette swallowed by the dark. I continued home, but my heart sank as I approached our porch. Iris was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, her face unreadable in the yellow porch light. I had no idea how long she'd been there, how much she'd heard. Wordlessly, she took my book bag from my shoulder. After a long moment, she spoke, her voice so soft it was almost carried away by the night insects. "Elara, if you're serious about college, maybe you should move into the school dorms. Fewer distractions." A week later I did. Iris helped me make the narrow bed in the austere, sun-bleached room. As she smoothed the final corner of the sheet, she wouldn't meet my eyes. Before she left, she paused at the door. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the floor. I ran to the small balcony overlooking the quad. "If you're going to apologize," I called down, my voice cracking slightly, "at least look at me when you say it." She stopped but didn't turn. Besides, I continued, the words tumbling out, I'm not mad. You're my sister. I'd never do anything to make you sad. I'll always choose you. You know that, right? Iris had always been the quiet one, the one who internalized everything. Our childhood conflicts always ended with me apologizing first, just to break the silence. It was a habit born of love, of not wanting the distance between us. Between my sister and my pride, I would always choose her. She didn't answer. She just raised a hand in a small, vague wave and walked away, her figure growing smaller until she vanished. I let out a long, slow breath. 2 lifetimes, I murmured to the empty quad. I've lived over 15 years longer than her. I can afford to let it go. My dorm life began. My 3 roommates, Sasha and twins Mara and Mina, were from remote villages, their presence here a hard-won ticket to opportunity. My town address marked me as an intruder, and they kept a cautious distance at first. I didn't explain. Every night after lights out, I'd click on my flashlight, balance my notebook on my knees, and review the day's mistakes, my body curled into increasingly awkward positions. One night, wrestling with a calculus problem for what felt like the 100th time, I was unaware that Sasha, the girl in the opposite bunk, had silently slid her wooden desk across the linoleum floor until it was right next to my bed. Use the desk, a clear, firm voice said. I looked up, startled. All 3 of them were standing around my bunk, each holding a flickering candle. I yelped, which made them burst into laughter. The ice was broken. Sasha, who was also my desk mate in history, became my de facto tutor. Mara and Mina, orphans raised by a weary grandmother, shared their precious care packages with fierce generosity. We were all fighting for the same dream, a quiet, desperate fire burning in each of us. We studied together, pooled our snacks, and late at night, in the glow of our shared candles, we whispered about futures that stretched beyond the mountains that ringed our town. The closer I grew to them, the wider the silent rift with Iris became. In the hallways, our eyes would sometimes meet, a flash of confusion and hurt in hers, a determined neutrality in mine, before she quickly looked away. The first monthly exam results were posted. I'd climbed 7 places in the class ranking. Math was still a struggle, but my other subjects showed clear improvement. Sasha was in the top 10 for our grade. I was staring at my paper, a mix of pride and frustration, when she snatched it from my hands. Stop picking at it. The trend is up. That's what matters. He grinned. Come on, let's get a soda. We later learned that Iris and Leo's grades had both slipped. Not long after, they too moved into the dorms for evening study. The next morning, Iris found me in the cafeteria. She sat across from me as if we'd planned it, her face a calm mask. The unspoken tension was shelved for now. I felt a flicker of relief. Here, Ilara. Sasha passed me a steamed bun filled with spicy turnip. My hand had just closed around it when a pair of chopsticks darted in, deftly plucking it away. A plain bun dropped into my bowl in its place. She doesn't eat turnip, Leo said, his tone casual, automatic. Then he froze. The realization hit us both like a physical blow. In our previous life, he hadn't discovered my violent aversion to turnip until years into our marriage, during a severe bout of morning sickness. The memory of that lost pregnancy, of his clinical insistence on an abortion, of the hollow, childless decades that followed, rose between us, ugly and stark. The screech of a chair on the floor shattered the moment. I'm done, Iris said softly, standing up though her bowl was still half full. She didn't look at either of us. Leo was on his feet in an instant, following her out. I watched them go, a profound weariness settling in my bones. Ilara, Mina mumbled around a mouthful of food. Does that Leo guy like you? Mara almost choked. Don't be daft. He's dating your sister. Exactly, I said, forcing a thin smile. Leo would rather walk on glass than love me. But his strange, possessive interference was a splinter in the smooth new life I was trying to build. I told myself it would pass. Once exams were over, everything would settle. I was wrong. The uneasy truce with Iris held for a week. Then one evening during self-study, Leo appeared at the doorway of my classroom. He ignored the curious stares, walked straight to my desk and picked up my open practice test. After scanning it for a moment, he tapped a problem with a scornful finger. You even got this wrong, Ilara. What are they teaching you in these tutorials? He grabbed a pen from my desk as if to correct it himself. I looked up, baffled and irritated. Leo, what are you doing? Are you here just to harass me? He stiffened, then manufactured a thin smile. You're overthinking. Iris asked me to bring you this. He produced a new workbook from his bag. As I reached for it, he leaned in, his voice dropping to a murmur meant only for me. Elara, isn't this exactly what you wanted? Before I could process the insinuation, before I could shove him away, a chair scraped back violently. Callum Reed stood up from his desk behind me. In one fluid motion he stepped between us, snatched my test paper and scratched out the correction Leo had just made. She didn't get it wrong, Callum said, his voice flat and cold. You did. Your method is archaic. Leo stared at him, stunned, then his gaze swiveled back to me, sharp with a bitter, knowing contempt. So that's it, he sneered. You were so eager to move into the dorms. So you could sneak around with him at night. The classroom fell silent. The air left my lungs. In a 1990s town like ours, such an accusation wasn't just gossip. It was a social death sentence, especially for a girl. I felt the blood drain from my face, my body going cold with a rage so profound it was silent. Before I could find my voice, Callum's fist connected with Leo's jaw with a sickening crack. The room erupted. Desks overturned, books flew. By the time Iris arrived with the teacher in tow, they were a tangled, grunting mess on the floor. Under the teacher's stern glare, Iris didn't look at me. She kept her eyes downcast, her voice a meek whisper. It's because Elara and Callum have been spending so much time together. Leo was just worried it would affect her studies. He lost his temper. I stood frozen, her words landing like separate, precise blows. She was protecting him. She was aligning the story to protect him, and in doing so she was painting me as the troublemaker, the distraction. The public reprimand at the next morning assembly was a blur of shame. The rumor spread like a stain, inescapable. That weekend at home, my father's face was purple with fury. You've shamed this family. If this is what school does, you're done. We're not wasting more money. You'll quit and we'll find you a decent match. The old, compliant Elara might have crumpled. But the woman who had lived through a loveless marriage and a violent death had a core of tempered steel. I lifted my head. I didn't do anything wrong. Leo started it. I'm not getting married. I'm going to college. I will go to college. I didn't wait for their reply. I ran out the door and back to the dorm, where I crawled into bed and pulled the blanket over my head, shaking not from cold, but from a betrayal that cut deeper than any of Leo's hatred. My own sister. I didn't know how long I lay there before the door creaked open. Elara, why didn't you go home? It was Mara's voice. Shoo, Sasha hushed her. She's hurting. But Mina came over and patted the lump I made under the blanket. It's okay. Actually, we're glad you're here. Grandma sent her famous chili oil. Come on, get up. It'll make you feel better. Their simple, stubborn kindness was a lifeline. I emerged, red-eyed, and let them feed me, the spicy warmth, the tangible comfort. The next morning, Callum was already at his desk, a dark bruise flowering on his temple. Without a word, he set a bottle of orange soda on my desk. About yesterday, he started. You don't have to thank me. Thank you. I cut him off, my voice icy. If you hadn't thrown that punch, I wouldn't have been publicly humiliated. The whole school wouldn't be talking about me. I met his gaze, suspicion hardening my tone. Did my sister put you up to this? What did she promise you? The easy smile died on his face. I grabbed the soda bottle to hand it back, but he caught my wrist. Elara, stop. His grip was firm. Tell me one thing. Since when have I ever listened to your sister? I wrenched my hand free. You transferred here last year. I saw you give her a letter myself. The memory was clear. The new city slick kid slipping a sealed envelope to Iris in the hallway. I'd written him off as another admirer in her long, unthinking parade. Callum's face flushed, not with embarrassment but with frustration. That letter, he said through gritted teeth, wasn't for your sister. It was for you. But you never got it. You didn't even look my way once. I stared at him, disbelieving. I'm not lying, he insisted, his voice softening, earnest. I like you, Elara. The first day I got here I saw you outside of town. You were climbing an old fence with a bunch of kids, going after some wild berries. You were laughing, running. You looked so free. A genuine grin broke through his seriousness. Like a little fox finally loose from its cage. Behind me, Sasha and the twins, who had been listening unabashedly, burst into giggles. My face burned. The image was so at odds with the careful, guilty girl I'd been, with the haunted woman I was now. Our little fox. Mina crowed, and even I couldn't stop a reluctant, shaky laugh from escaping. It was true. That wild, careless girl was a part of me I'd buried under decades of grief and duty. I looked at Callum, who was scratching his head, suddenly boyish and awkward, his earlier cynicism gone. His eyes were bright, clear. And I knew with absolute certainty that I could not let myself like him. Not now. My heart was a battlefield still littered with the shrapnel of the past. My only focus had to be the future, the one I was building with my own hands. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I misunderstood you." His face lit up, relief transforming it. "As long as you're not mad. Can I join your study group? I'm not bad at some of this stuff. I could help." I glanced at Sasha, our unofficial leader. Her smile faded into a look of serious assessment. "Callum," she said, "you can join if you score higher than me on the next monthly. If you can't beat me, how can you help Alara?" He didn't beat her. But he started tagging along anyway, a persistent, gradually accepted shadow. He brought snacks as tribute, made terrible jokes that made Mina snort, and slowly we discovered his casual claim was true: he was brilliant. He just hadn't seen a reason to try before. One afternoon, as Sasha struggled with a complex physics problem, he glanced over, scribbled 3 lines of elegant calculus on her scratch paper, and solved it. Her eyes went wide. "Huh," was all she said, but the respect was instant. We also learned his story. A wealthy father, a remarried life in the city, a stepmother who wanted her own children to inherit. He'd been politely exiled here to finish school. He told it with a wry smile as if it were a funny anecdote, but the loneliness beneath was palpable. He wasn't arrogant. He was adrift. And somehow, in our cramped, determined little study circle, he found an anchor. Winter arrived, draping our small town in a hushed, white silence. I hadn't been home in weeks. One weekend, Iris came to the dorm, her arms laden with a thick blanket, winter boots, and a heavy coat. She set them on my bed without meeting my eyes. Her and Leo's grades had plateaued, stubbornly mediocre. She was about to leave when I called her name from the doorway. We stood under the eaves, watching the snow fall in fat, silent flakes, our breath painting ghosts in the cold air. "Iris," I began, my voice quiet. "Why don't you believe me? I really don't like Leo anymore. You thought I did, so I moved out. I listened to you. Then he insulted me, started a fight, and you blamed me. I haven't spoken to him since. I've done everything you asked. What more do you want?" She listened, her gaze on the falling snow, her profile a perfect closed-off mask. When I finished, she asked a question so soft it was almost lost. "What if he likes you?" "That's his problem," I said without hesitation. "His feelings have nothing to do with me. And he doesn't like me, Iris. He just thinks my world should still revolve around his choices." I reached out, took her cold hand. "I only care about you. You're my sister. We're family." She offered a faint, bitter smile. "Really? But tell me, Alara, is there still room for me in your life now?" Her voice trembled slightly. "You have new friends. You eat with them, study with them. It feels like you don't need me anymore." "They're great, but that doesn't mean..." She shook her head, cutting me off. Without another word, she turned and walked into the curtain of snow, her silhouette fading until she was gone. After that, the distance became a canyon. Leo, however, became more persistent. He sent notes, waited for me by the river path. I ignored them all. New Year's Day brought a brief respite. My parents thought I was at a school review session. Instead, I went to the small rented room where Callum lived. The moment I opened the door, warmth and the rich scent of simmering broth enveloped me. Sasha and Mara were arranging platters of vegetables, while Mina was trying to cajole Callum into a game of rock-paper-scissors for who would fetch drinks. "Of course I lose," Callum groaned theatrically, grabbing his coat. "The host does all the work. You're all tyrants." We sat around his coal stove, the windows steamed over, the world outside reduced to a soft, white blur. As we ate, laughter echoing in the small space, the conversation turned, as it always did with us, to the future. "So, what are you all thinking for majors?" Mina asked, spearing a mushroom. "Finance," Callum said without hesitation. "My dad's fortune isn't just his. Part of it belonged to my mother. I'm not letting my step-siblings have it all. I'm taking back what's mine. I admired his clarity. Business management for me, I said. The experience of my past life, the quiet observation of missed opportunities, the understanding of systems, pointed me there. Mara and Mina grinned, their faces flushed from the heat. We haven't decided. Something practical. Something that lets us build a proper house for Grandma and Uncle. Then it was Sasha's turn. She hesitated, her chopsticks hovering over her bowl. Shli, I want to study medicine. She shook her head almost immediately, her expression clouding. But it's too long, too expensive. I'll probably pick something cheaper. Something that gets me a job fast. The room fell quiet for a beat, the crackle of the coal the only sound. I reached over and squeezed her shoulder. You're the smartest person I know, Sasha. Whatever you choose, you'll excel. Callum suddenly raised his bottle of soda, his grin returning. To that. To all of us. 5 glass bottles clinked together with a sound like hope. To our dreams. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, wrapped in steam and friendship, I felt a warmth I hadn't known in either of my lives. This was what I had fought for. This was my fresh start. After the holiday, we returned to our relentless routine. One afternoon, as a heavy snowstorm swirled outside, we took our final exams for the semester. We'd planned to celebrate, but as soon as the last paper was handed in, Sasha was called to the office. Her face went pale and she packed her bag in a frantic hurry, rushing out into the blizzard to catch the last bus home. Worried, I suggested we postpone our plans. The next morning, I went to see Callum off. His father had sent a car to collect him for the remainder of the break. Just before he got in, he suddenly turned and pulled me into a tight, brief hug, his voice muffled by my scarf. Elara, are you absolutely sure there's no chance for me? I hugged him back, a firm, friendly pressure. I'm sure. You're my best friend, Callum. Just like Sasha and the twins. And friendship lasts longer than anything else. He pulled back, his trademark smirk back in place, though his eyes were soft. All right then. But the offer stands always. He dodged my playful swat. Happy New Year, Elara. See you after break. I waved as the car crunched away through the snow. When I turned, my breath caught. Leo stood under the bare branches of the old sycamore at the crossroads, snow dusting his shoulders and hair. I didn't know how long he'd been watching. Elara. His voice was raw. He walked toward me, his eyes hollow with a pain that looked genuine. Do you like him? I didn't answer, turning to leave. He caught up, his hand gripping my shoulder, forcing me to face him. You won't even look at me now? He whispered, his voice trembling. Do you have any idea what this has been like? The more time I spend with Iris, the more I miss how things used to be with us. Revulsion, cold and sharp, shot through me. I slapped him. The crack was startling in the muffled, snowy quiet. He staggered back, hand to his cheek, his expression one of utter shock. You disgust me, I spat, my voice low and venomous. What do you think we are? 2 dolls you can swap between when you're bored. My words seemed to physically wound him. His hand dropped. That's not it. I don't even know how this happened. I know I've wronged Iris, but I realize now, the person I truly love is you. Blair, please. Come back to me. The audacity, the sheer selfish revision of history stole my breath. That's enough, I said, my voice colder than the air. Don't say another word. You've lost any right. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the falling snow, a monument to his own regret. Classes resumed. Callum returned with gifts, soft wool scarves for each of us. But by the 3rd day, Sasha's bed was still empty. Worried, I went to the teacher's office. They told me with awkward evasion that she had withdrawn. Family matters, they said. We were devastated. When our semester grades were posted, the 3 of us had just scraped the college admission line. Sasha's name, however, was listed 3rd in the entire grade. That weekend, we bundled up and made the long, arduous trek to her village, following directions scribbled on a scrap of paper. We found her sitting under the eaves of a small, weathered house, chopping feed for pigs. When she saw us, surprise flashed across her face, followed by a deep, resigned sadness. She led us into the dim, single-room house. The smell of medicinal herbs hung in the air. Gently we pressed her. My mother fell, she finally said, her voice unervingly calm. She's bedridden now. My father can't manage the farm and her care alone. My younger brother and sister already had to leave school. If I go to college, the family falls apart. Her father entered then, a kind-faced man weighed down by worry. He spoke cheerfully of having found Sasha a good match, a fiancé from the next village. After New Year's they would go to the city to work together. We were speechless. Mina, desperate, pulled out Sasha's stellar exam paper. Sir, Sasha is one of the best in the county. She could go anywhere. Being smart doesn't fill a rice bowl, he said gently with infinite sorrow. He glanced at Sasha. This is our fate, daughter. We got you through high school. That's more than most. After he left the room, Sasha stared at the fire in the hearth. Then, in a sudden, decisive motion, she grabbed the stack of her perfect exam papers and threw them into the flames. We watched, horrified, as the evidence of her brilliance curled into black ash. This is my fate, she repeated, her voice hollow. She walked us to the gate. Go home, she said, her voice gaining a firm edge. Study. Work 1,000 times harder. Do it for me too. She closed the wooden gate before we could protest. The walk back was silent, a funeral procession for a future. That night in the dorm, Mina cried quietly into her pillow. When her sobs subsided, she lit a candle and carefully spread Sasha's remaining notebooks across the empty bed. I opened one. Every margin was filled with meticulous notes, diagrams, solved equations in her neat, compact script. Don't cry, I said, my own throat tight. She told us to study harder for her. From that day on we did. We became machines of focus. Even Callum shed his last vestiges of casualness, his brow permanently furrowed in concentration. We ate quickly, solved problems slowly, and moved through the days in a shared, determined haze. A week later, Sasha appeared at the school gate. We ran to her, hearts leaping with wild, foolish hope. Her smile was sad. I came to say goodbye. My fiancé is waiting at the bus station. Mina threw her arms around her, weeping openly. My own vision blurred. Callum abruptly turned and sprinted away. He returned minutes later, breathless, with an old camera, commandeering a passerby to take a picture. The photo captured the 5 of us standing in front of our school under a gray winter sky, snow catching in our hair. Our faces were young, etched with a loss that felt too old for them. I held Sasha's hand tightly. When you go to the city, I told her, my voice thick, go south. To the coast. More opportunities. She nodded, tears glistening but her smile radiant. You all have to live well. Promise me. We stood waving until the bus disappeared, a speck swallowed by the white road. A piece of our circle was gone, carving a permanent hollow in our world. Time in our final semester became a swift, dark river carrying us toward the looming cliff of the college entrance exams. We moved like ghosts through the halls, our faces pale from late nights, our fingers stained with ink. The rumor that had once clung to me had faded, replaced by a kind of respect for our grim determination. Leo and Iris became peripheral figures in my world. I walked past them as if they were furniture. I heard through the school grapevine that they had broken up. Iris's grades, which had been slipping, plummeted from university level to barely qualifying for a community college. It pained me to see her unravel over that boy, but she maintained her wall of silence, her eyes skittering away whenever our paths crossed. The air shifted from the bite of winter to the damp promise of spring, and then suddenly it was July. The night before the exams, as I was reviewing my notes for the final time, a folded note was slipped under my dorm room door. In Iris's precise handwriting it read, "Meet me at the river. The old spot. Please." My stomach twisted. Every instinct screamed not to go. The river was a place of ghosts and bad endings. But she was my sister. And the word please was one she rarely used. I hesitated, then, driven by a stubborn filament of hope, I went. The moon was a sliver, offering little light. The river sighed its endless, forgotten song. She wasn't there. A figure stepped from the shadows of the willow tree. Leo. My blood turned to ice. I turned to run, but he was faster. He caught me, his hands like iron bands on my arms, and shoved me backward onto the thick grass. "Ilara," he rasped, his eyes wild in the gloom, his breath hot and sour with desperation. "Don't take the exams. We can fix this. We can go back." He was on me, his weight pinning me down. Panic, sharp and familiar, lanced through me. This was a different violence than the push from the bridge. but it came from the same poisoned well. Get off me, I snarled, bucking against him. Iris and I are over. In this life and the last, he cried as if it were a revelation. You were always supposed to be mine. It was always you. He tried to kiss me, his hand fumbling at the collar of my shirt, the fabric tearing with a sickening sound. I fought, but his strength, fueled by a deranged obsession, was overwhelming. As his face loomed closer, a terrifying calm settled over me. I stopped struggling and glared directly into his frantic eyes. Leo, I said, my voice chillingly steady. Listen to me. A woman's worth has never been between her legs. Not in that life and certainly not in this one. Don't you dare think you can use this to make me surrender. My defiance seemed to short-circuit his madness, redirecting it into pure rage. You will be mine, he growled, his grip tightening. Just as my strength began to truly fail, a scream shattered the night. Leo, are you insane? Iris. She rushed toward us, a pale blur in the darkness. You told me you just wanted to apologize to her. You lied to me. She grabbed his arm, trying to pull him off. With a roar of frustration, he shoved her away violently. She fell back with a cry. Get out of my way, he yelled, turning his fury on her. If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened. She would have been mine. In that moment, all of Iris's quiet hurt, her confusion, her own betrayal, coalesced into a pure, explosive force. With a guttural cry that didn't sound like her, she launched herself at him, shoving him with all her might. He wasn't expecting it. He stumbled backward, his arms wheeling for balance. His head struck a large mossy rock at the river's edge with a dull, terrible thud. The world went utterly silent. Leo slumped to the ground, motionless. Iris stood frozen, her hands flying to her mouth, her whole body beginning to tremble. I scrambled to my feet, my own breath coming in ragged gasps, staring at the dark, spreading stain on the rock. This was it. The circle was complete. On this riverbank in our first life he had pushed me to my death. Now he lay still by the same water. After what felt like an eternity, a low groan escaped him. He stirred, clutching his head, and staggered to his feet. Blood gleamed darkly on his temple and cheek in the weak moonlight. He looked at Iris, his eyes dazed, filled with a confusion that seemed to cut through his obsession, then at me with a look of utter, shattered disbelief. Without a word, he turned and stumbled away, weaving into the darkness along the river path, vanishing as if swallowed by the past itself. Iris collapsed, falling to her knees in the grass. She crawled toward me, her sobs breaking the silence in wrenching gasps. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I almost let him. I'm sorry. I dropped down and gathered her into my arms, holding her shaking form. My own tears fell silently into her hair. It's okay, I whispered over and over. It's over. You're okay. You saved me. We sat there by the river of our nightmares, holding each other as the night slowly lightened into gray dawn. The ghost was finally laid to rest. Not with forgiveness but with an ending. The next morning I walked into the examination hall. My hands were steady. My mind was a clear, calm pool. The ghosts were silent. Leo, we learned later, was in the hospital with a concussion. He missed the entire examination period. The irony was not lost on me. In our first life his choice had derailed my future. In this one his obsession had derailed his own. The final exams passed in a blur of focused intensity. That summer our results arrived. I had done it. I had scored well enough for a good university in the South, a coastal city I had only ever dreamed of. Mara and Mina got into a solid teachers' college together. Callum, unsurprisingly, aced his way into a top-tier finance program. We had one last simple meal together, our eyes red, our laughter tinged with the ache of Sasha's absence and the relief of survival. We pressed our hands together in a circle. Meet again in college, we promised, a vow to the future. As I left the restaurant I saw Iris waiting for me at the end of the street. The evening breeze lifted her hair, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she offered me a soft, genuine smile. Alara, she said. Have you decided? Which school? I'm going south, I said. I want to see the ocean. What about you? She didn't answer, just smiled again a little sadly. I'm glad for you. A few mornings later, before anyone else was awake, she quietly packed a single suitcase and left. There was no note. No dramatic farewell. It was weeks before I learned she had enrolled in a small university far to the north, as far from this town, this river, and these memories as she could get. I understood. She needed to find herself, away from the shadow of being my twin, away from the ghost of Leo's love. It was her fresh start. By September, holding my acceptance letter, I stood with Mara and Mina on the platform of our small town station. Our parents waved, their faces a mosaic of pride and worry. The train whistle blew, a sound of thrilling finality. As the train began to move, I looked out the window. The town receded, the river becoming a distant, silver thread in the landscape. The shimmering water, the tangled memories, the love, the loss. All of it finally fell away, growing smaller and smaller until it disappeared. A weight I had carried for 2 lifetimes lifted. My heart felt impossibly light. Ahead was only sky and sea and a future that was mine alone. My freshman year of college was a sensory explosion. The southern city was a universe away from our quiet, snow-dusted town. A cacophony of traffic, humid salt air, and endless possibility. The campus was lush and sprawling, and for the first few months, I moved through it in a daze of freedom, slightly terrified, utterly exhilarated. Mara and Mina were at their teacher's college a few hours away by train. We wrote long looping letters on thin blue airmail paper, filled with descriptions of new friends, difficult classes, and the profound weirdness of cafeteria food. Callum, at his prestigious university, sent typed letters on thick bond paper. He'd gotten a computer, his witty sarcasm translating perfectly to the page. He was already talking about internships and market dynamics. And then a miracle. A letter arrived, not on airmail paper but on simple stationery, postmarked from a southern manufacturing province. It was from Sasha. Her handwriting was the same but firmer. She wrote that she had broken off the engagement not long after arriving in the city. The man had wanted a wife, not a partner. She'd found work in a garment factory in Jiangsu, her nimble fingers and quick mind soon moving her from the assembly line to quality control. The letter was matter-of-fact, but between the lines I could read a fierce, hard-won independence. I wrote back immediately, pouring out everything: the exams, our acceptances, the coastal breeze. A correspondence began, a lifeline across the distance of our vastly different lives. College was not easy. I was playing catch-up in many ways, my foundational knowledge patchy. But I had a weapon my younger peers lacked. A relentless, unglamorous work ethic born from knowing what it meant to have no choices. I stayed late in the library, sought out professors during office hours and formed study groups. I learned to code on clunky desktop computers, analyzed case studies until my eyes ached, and slowly I began not just to cope but to excel. During my junior year, another letter came from Sasha. This one crackled with a new energy. She was taking night classes in design and business management. She had saved every spare yuan. "The factory owners are fools," she wrote. "They see fabric and labor. I see lines, markets, trends. I have sketches, Ilara. So many sketches." Callum, during one of his visits, read that part of the letter over my shoulder. He let out a low whistle. "She's got the fire. That's where the real opportunity is. Not in inheriting old money but in building something new." He surprised me. The next time he wrote, he included a separate typed page for Sasha. A rudimentary business plan analysis, market suggestions, even contact names for fabric wholesalers. I forwarded it, my heart swelling with a strange pride for them both. My life settled into a new rhythm. I dated occasionally, nice, interesting boys from my classes, but my heart remained my own. I was too busy building the woman I was becoming. The scars of the past were still there, but they had healed into smooth, strong tissue, reminders of survival, not open wounds. I heard snippets of home. Leo had eventually recovered, returned to school a year behind, and was reportedly a ghost of his former self. Quiet, fiercely studious, as if trying to academically outrun his demons. I felt nothing for him. Not hatred, not pity. He was simply a character from a book I had closed. Iris and I exchanged polite, careful letters at first, then longer ones as the years softened the sharp edges of our past. She was studying literature in the north, finding solace in poetry and the stark, beautiful landscapes. She never mentioned Leo. She wrote about a professor who encouraged her writing, about the silence of snowy plains, about slowly learning who she was when she wasn't someone's twin or someone's girlfriend. Our relationship was being rewoven, thread by cautious thread into something new, not the inseparable bond of childhood, but the chosen connection of adults who shared a profound and complicated history. In my final year of university, as I was deep in my thesis on emerging economic models in coastal development zones, a telegram arrived. It was from Callum, which was bizarre in itself. It contained only a city name, a date and a time: Guangzhou. April 15th. 2 p.m. Jinfeng Tea House. Be there. Intrigued and slightly worried, I made the trip. The tea house was all dark wood and the fragrant steam of oolong. And there they were, Callum in a shockingly well-cut suit, looking every inch the young financier, and beside him Sasha. I barely recognized her. The shy, determined girl was gone. In her place was a woman with a sharp, intelligent gaze, her hair cut in a sleek, modern style. She wore a simple but beautifully tailored dress of her own design. They were leaning over a spread of fabric swatches and financial papers, arguing good-naturedly. When they saw me, Sasha's face broke into the radiant smile I remembered. We hugged, laughing and crying at once. "Explain," I demanded, wiping my eyes. Callum grinned. "I made my first investment." "Her." He nodded at Sasha. "She's not just a designer. She's a visionary. I provided the capital, the business nonsense. He provides the genius. We've got a small workshop. We're calling it Sparrow Threads. Starting with tailored pieces for professional women. No more shapeless, awful suits." Sasha rolled her eyes at his grandstanding, but her pride was evident. "He's not entirely useless. He negotiated the lease. But the patterns, the sourcing, the vision, that's mine. We need people," Callum said, his tone shifting to serious. "Smart, trustworthy people who understand hustle. Mara and Mina graduate this year, right? We need operations managers, people with heart and a good head for logistics." He looked directly at me. "And we need someone with a business mind, who understands the big picture but isn't afraid of the details. Someone to grow with us." Sasha reached across the table, taking my hand. Her fingers, once calloused from farm and factory work, were still strong. "Alara, come work with me. It's more than a workshop now. We're building something. Together." I looked at their faces, Callum's eager confidence, Sasha's hard-earned certainty, and felt the disparate threads of my two lives snap together. This was the future I had fought for in that river. This was the family I had chosen in those candlelit dorm rooms. I didn't need to think. Yes. Graduation was a blur of ceremonies and farewells. Mara and Mina, true to their practical natures, had already secured their teaching credentials but were immediately swayed by the passionate pitch from Callum and Sasha. The promise of building something tangible, of being part of a venture that felt like family, outweighed the security of a state-assigned teaching post. We all converged on Guangzhou that summer. The city was a roaring engine of change, and we were tiny cogs willingly jumping into the mechanism. Sparrow Threads was, in the beginning, exactly what it sounded like. A single sun-drenched workshop above a noisy street market, filled with the hum of sewing machines and the smell of new cloth. Sasha was the undisputed creative heart. Her designs were a revelation, elegant blends of traditional Chinese lines and modern Western-inspired practicality. They were clothes for women who were moving, working, building their own lives. Callum was the outside face, the negotiator, the one who secured loans, wooed boutique owners, and talked numbers with a glib charm that concealed a razor-sharp intellect. Mara and Mina fell into operations seamlessly. They managed the workers Sasha hired, proud, skilled women from the local community, with a fairness and warmth that inspired fierce loyalty. They handled schedules, quality control and logistics, their twin intuition making them an efficient, unstoppable team. My role evolved. With my business degree, I handled the books, the marketing strategies, the long-term planning. But it was never just a job. It was our shared dream, and we poured every ounce of ourselves into it. We worked 16-hour days, ate noodles at our drafting tables, and fell asleep to the sound of each other's voices planning the next day. There were fights, of course. Callum and Sasha clashed over budgets versus creative vision. Mara and I disagreed on expansion timelines. But the fights were clean, born of passion for the thing we were building, and they always ended with compromise and a shared pot of tea. 2 years in, we moved to a proper factory floor on the outskirts of the city. The Sparrow label began to appear in upscale boutiques in Shanghai and Beijing. A magazine featured Sasha, calling her the pragmatic poet of the new Chinese woman. Callum framed the article and hung it in the office, much to her exasperation. It was during the launch of our third major collection that Iris walked into the showroom. I hadn't seen her in 5 years. She looked different. Softer in some ways, sharper in others. The northern winters had bleached strands of her hair almost silver, and her eyes held a calm depth that hadn't been there before. She was carrying a published collection of poetry under her arm. We stared at each other across the room, the noise of the launch party fading to a hum. Then she smiled, and it was the unguarded smile of our childhood. He stayed for a week. She didn't offer empty praise. Instead, she observed. She watched Sasha in the design studio, Callum charming a buyer, the twins moving through the factory floor. She sat in my tiny office, now with a window overlooking the city, and listened as I talked about profit margins and brand identity. On her last night, as we shared a pot of jasmine tea on my small apartment balcony, she spoke quietly. You did it, Alara. You really built a life. It's messy and loud and full of these people you love. It's real. It is, I said, feeling the truth of it in my bones. I'm writing again, she said. Not just poetry. A novel. It's about 2 sisters. And a river. And the lives they choose after. My throat tightened. I reached over and took her hand. I'd like to read it someday. You will, she promised. You're in every page. She returned to the north, but the distance between us no longer felt like separation. It felt like 2 different trees, growing strongly in different soils, their roots forever intertwined beneath the earth. One afternoon a few years later, Callum strolled into my office and dropped a glossy international business magazine on my desk. It was open to a profile of Sparrow Threads and its unconventional founding team. There was a photo of the 5 of us, taken in the new factory, surrounded by bolts of gorgeous fabric. We looked tired, happy, and utterly ourselves. Not bad for a bunch of misfits from a nowhere town, huh? He said, his voice suspiciously thick. I looked at the photo, at Sasha's confident stance, the twins' mirrored smiles, Callum's rakish grin, and my own expression, one of calm, grounded satisfaction. I thought of the girl drowning in a river of grief and obligation. I thought of the woman who had fought her way to the surface, gasping for air and a second chance. Not bad at all, I whispered. The story that began with a choice made in panic, that twisted through a lifetime of regret and a violent, watery end, had been rewritten. It was no longer a tragedy. It was a story of salvage. Of taking the broken pieces of 2 lives and using them to build something stronger, more beautiful, and entirely new. My name is Alara. I was saved from a river, then drowned in a marriage, and finally I learned to swim. I built a life not defined by the man who saved me or the sister I lost, but by the woman I became and the family I forged. The past is a quiet country I rarely visit. The present is this sunlit room, the hum of industry below, the laughter of my friends echoing down the hall, and the boundless open sky of a future we are stitching together, one perfect defiant thread at a time. The end.